May I please request Mr. Al-Sayed Abdalla and Mr. Hisham Oweis and Dr. Florian on stage, please. Mr. Abdalla, Legal Director, Dubai Holding, has an extensive legal experience gained over 23 years of practicing the law in 2 jurisdictions, and we have already introduced him in the morning. Mr. Oweis is the head of legal and compliance at Samsung Electronics. Dr. Florian is the vice president and general counsel at Siemens Energy Middle East. So over to you, Dr. Florian.
Thank you. Yeah, I will stand. Welcome again. Now I would like to discuss the force majeure and the COVID-19 situation. Actually, many are confusing or mixing up between the force majeure and the exceptional circumstances under the civil law. There is a big difference between both topics. Force majeure can lead to termination of the contract since the obligation of both parties are impossible to be achieved. But in the COVID-19 situation, I see that it's not force majeure in all of the cases, and we have to estimate each case by case. For example, if there is a minor impact on the obligation, on the contract, then it's an exceptional circumstances, and they can lead to only making a balance between both parties' obligations, reduce of an obligation on one party than the other. And this is why we could see recently, for example, the banks in the loans and the credit cards, they didn't cancel the loan, but they reschedule the installments. The same thing in the rent and the rental relationship in the landlord and the tenant. We also find out that some of the landlords reduced the rent or waived the rent for the lockdown period only, but they didn't cancel or terminate the lease agreement itself. The same thing also in the construction contracts. Maybe the contractor was eligible to extension of time, but not to terminate the construction contract itself. This is why we should always find the difference between force majeure and the exceptional circumstances. And they are also regulated under the civil transaction law of UAE under 2 different articles of law. Force majeure is regulated under Article 273, and the exceptional circumstances regulated under Clause 249. So if I am a defendant in one of the cases and I receive a claim from the opponent to terminate a contract with me, saying that there is COVID-19 situation, force majeure, I have to terminate. I am not able to achieve my obligation, my commitment under the contract anymore. There are many elements can affect that case, and also it can support my legal position. I have seen in many of the litigation cases that the court appointed expert who could make a comparison between the financials of the year 2020 from March to July, comparing the same period of time in 2019. And when they found out that it's the same percentage of loss, they found out that COVID-19 was the same reason, was not the right reason for the loss the tenant achieved. So they rejected his claim. It's also important to estimate what is the activity and is it impacted under the COVID-19 situation or not. because some of the activities during the pandemic and the COVID-19 lockdown period from March to July, it was booming, like the food and the beverage, like the delivery, like the supermarket. All of these activities, they didn't had any negative impact on their profit. So this is what I would like to say today, and also I will leave the word to Mr. Hisham and Dr. Florian to elaborate. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity, LexTalk. I'm so happy to be in a room of people other than my wife and my son. It's the first time I meet more than 10 people at the same venue since March 2020. So my colleague Sayed started by describing what is force majeure under the UAE law. The topic is AI and how it can help in reviewing force majeure. What is AI? Artificial intelligence. AI is a wide range of science concerned in building machines that can perform tasks that is initially done by human. Now, the concept of artificial intelligence in our industry as legal people, it is not to replace legal counsels. It's to support them, to help them do their job in a more effective manner. So today, a job that needs 10 legal counsels over a period of 10 days can be done through AI within a matter of seconds. Now, we will explain more about that, how we'll do it, after my colleague, Dr. Florian, will do his part.
Yeah, thanks for having me and for having the opportunity to speak to you all. So when I looked at the topic for this panel, I thought, wow, it's super interesting from a legal perspective. Yeah, both topics, force majeure, the pandemic, and artificial intelligence. Why is that? Both of them are unprecedented. So it's something for us to deal with that we have never seen. Now, the pandemic is, of course, horrible, but from a legal perspective, at the same time, also fascinating and very interesting. It's something I've never dealt with in my legal life before, and that makes it very interesting to deal with the consequences that have been outlined before. Same thing with artificial intelligence. Yeah, we don't really know what it does to our profession, what it does to the profession of others. We don't know how to deal with it. What happens if artificial intelligence is wrong? Who's liable? The artificial intelligence? Certainly not. Yeah, but who's going to be liable for that? So all interesting questions, but the most difficult question for this panel is how to bring these two topics together. So again, thank you very much, LexTalk, for this challenge. And when I approached it, I thought, would AI have helped me in dealing with the situation caused by the pandemic? And I believe the answer is no. Why is that? AI, at least to my humble knowledge, is always based on an algorithm. And what an algorithm needs to properly function is a huge amount of data. And in the situation with the pandemic, and why everybody freaked out, was we didn't have the data. We knew nothing about it. All we knew was that we knew nothing. So there were a lot of tools, IT tools, Microsoft Teams in particular, that helped us to keep it up, to deal with it, but it was not necessarily AI. And this thought, I think, also gives us some guidance as to what AI could mean for our profession, for our industry, as you pointed out. I think it will help us on matters where we have to process a lot of data. So M&A data rooms, e-discovery. These may be topics where I believe AI will have a huge impact on our profession. So it may save the first-year associate from having to spend weeks and weeks in rooms without windows where only snacks are being brought through the door. Yeah, but I do not think it will have much of an impact in the unprecedented case where I believe our biggest value add is, simply for the fact that there's going to be a lack of sufficient data to create an algorithm to solve these unique one-off cases?
I think, Florian, this topic will depend on the industry and the type of business you are doing. So, for example, for us in Samsung, we are a company that deals with hundreds or thousands within this region of customers, whether retailers, distributors, logistics, normal shops where you see in Dira and Naif. So we have standard contracts. But what happens in these situations is we get an instruction from our upper management. Okay, there's a hot topic, force majeure in pandemic. Do the review. Now I have 1,000 contracts. I have a very limited time to do the review for all these documents. So I did not have the AI, but if I had the AI and I had the data filled in the keywords that are required to search for that, I would have used this tool. It will categorize my contracts, show me which ones does not have the standard force majeure clause, which we know by heart, and it will reduce my review time from reviewing 1,000 documents to review 20, 30 irregular agreements, which we did not have. Now, the problem with companies like Samsung is that we have a global system for contract management. So any solution for AI has to come from headquarters because you cannot integrate it on a local level. It's a global system that is linked, so it's more complicated to have that. And then when you develop a system for a multinational, it has to be usable for colleagues in the UK, in Europe, in Asia. So not all the clauses are same. Not the regulations are different. You have common law, you have civil law. So these are all matters that will create an obstacle for AI. I think with time, with practice, we can overcome these obstacles. But with this specific pandemic, we all were taken by surprise. So we all thought in March 2020, oh, it's going to be a month. Summer will be okay. Then, no, it's going to take another 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And we are 2021, and we're still going into lockdown in many cities around the world. So I think eventually AI will support us, and it will reduce our burden as legal counsels to be able to handle strategic matters rather than reviewing simple NDAs and simple agreements. But I think with this, at this certain point, as Dr. Florian said, it could have not helped us the way it's expected to. No, it will never be a replacement for in-house counsels. It will give you the luxury of time to do the actual work you're intended to be doing.
And I think it will help us to focus on where our true value add is. And that is not reviewing the same contract 1,000 times, but it is handling a unique situation. This is where our value add should be. So I think what you said is absolutely right. I think in my industry, it would not have even helped for the review of the contract because all our customers are different, all our contracts are different, all our projects are different. And the impact of COVID-19 or any other event on each project also always is different. And I simply lack the fantasy how you will create an algorithm that is able to handle this. Of course, that's also what I like to think because I like my job. But this is, I think, where we are. So you said it right. For the standard case, there will be support to maybe AI can help us to process the 1,500-page contract that one of the speakers this morning had mentioned that absolutely are to be avoided. I couldn't agree more. It will not be a replacement, but I do think it will dramatically change our industry by allowing us to do something good, and that is focusing on where our true value add is.
True. And I think what legal counsels should start doing is focusing on when they draft these contracts and these clauses that we will use AI to search with or to help us with, to put into consideration to simplify the wording and start standardizing the wording for a certain event or certain clauses in order to ensure that the margin of error of AI is minimal. Because today, for force majeure, for example, you can use force majeure, you can use, as Sayed said, unexpected event. Okay, AI is intelligent, but we can manage to make it very difficult for AI even to help with that. So we have to start training ourselves in order to, when we're drafting contract, know that there's a machine that will be reading after you. So standardize the contracts, the wordings. Do not make it complicated, and make it easy for you to be, how can I say, for the machine to help you in the future when you need it. Thankfully, we did not need it at this point of time, but I think in the future, we will.
I read about some sort of technology. Recently, I was reading about some sort of technology whereby it can give a legal advice. So you can just upload the facts and you expect to receive the advice from that technology or this application. Do you think that it will be applicable or can be applicable?
I think it's difficult for a machine to be able to just based on uploading certain facts to give you the required advice, especially if it's legal. If you're asking for a food recipe, maybe. But for us as legal, human factor will never go away. And personally, no matter what they say and no matter how advanced this technology becomes, I would never trust a machine when it comes to legal advice. I hardly trust lawyers. Maybe it would facilitate. Now they're using it for contracts. So certain tools that are in the market now, you upload, as you said, facts or data, and it will provide you with agreements, whether NDA or certain agreements. But legal advice, I still did not see that.
I think there are two aspects to it. Yeah, one aspect is let's say, the analysis of the facts. And there I think AI will have a huge impact. So if one has read Daniel Kahneman and you're a fan, then you will always say, okay, the algorithm always makes the better decision. But again, the algorithm needs a huge amount of data to process. So if we're analyzing facts and we have a huge amount of data, I disagree with you. I would always trust the algorithm and not a human being because we're always driven by impressions. The other thing is, if you now get the legal advice from the algorithm, it's still legal advice. So let's assume the other party does the same, and they also get their advice from AI. What if the two don't agree? How do we overcome this? So I think the second aspect is where, let's say, legal psychology and negotiation and these type of things come into place. And there, I just cannot see AI having an impact because the algorithm is always going to deliver the same result, same as the other algorithm on the other side. And that way, they're not going to be able to compromise, right? So there I see the limitations of how AI can support us.
Anyone from the audience ever used AI in contracts review? Very interesting topic for LexTalk.
I didn't use AI for any contract review, but I have seen some scheme of documents in the market, and it's for sale, like business inbox, for example. I believe it's almost close to the same idea where you have everything ready and you just need to make minor amendments.
Like a document or something in the market, but AI, as Dr. Florian said, it's an algorithm-based machines that do just more. It's doing thinking. You want to talk?
So I basically do this on a day-to-day basis. So AI systems basically learn from from the documents that you feed in. So in terms of a contract review, it basically can understand. It doesn't look for terms. it basically looks for contexts or concepts in the document, and it would basically help you understand based on a particular template document that you can provide. So it definitely would help you reduce a lot of effort. It doesn't, as you suggested, it would definitely not replace humans. And at the same time, it would also have like when you upload a document and if it gives you legal advice, it would not be exactly correct because it would not understand the outlying facts. Like it would only learn from what you actually provide to it. But as a human being, you would know more of the matter that you're dealing with or the company or the situation that you are in. So you might get some insights, but not everything is going to be exactly the same. And you can't actually say, okay, fine, this is what the system said, and I can go with it. So that's what I feel.
Yeah, correct. So again, it helps you reduce the burden of work that you have. So AI tools that I've seen in the market can help you classify the type of contracts you have, can help you classify the clauses based on the keywords in content, can highlight the important phrases even in a contract based on the topic that you're or the keywords that you're looking for. It can help you and it can reduce the burden, but as you said, it cannot replace human. But for me, it was easier to review that 20 documents that were triggered by the system rather than reviewing the 1,500 contracts that we had.
That's correct. So it would basically, you can actually set a threshold and say, okay, fine, what are the contracts that look 90% similar to what I have uploaded? And then it would flag, you can say, these out of these 100 contracts, 85 of them look perfectly fine, or is 99 or 98% similar, but these have these additions. So it would immediately flag in those 20% or 15%, which would significantly reduce your review burden, especially when the documents are 1,500 pages and more.
True. But for us, as I said, as multinational, the problem is how to integrate that tool on a global level.
So I would wear my software development hat over here. So basically, you can basically have templates in term, like any system that you build can feed in multiple templates in. And it would mostly be, if you treat each region as a different template, then it would definitely be possible. Similar to how you would have different contracts in the same region, just treat it like that. So a global industry would be split into different templates, and then it works well.
I think what you are referring to is not particular to AI, and it's also not particular to big multinationals that start with an S, but to all multinationals, is that whenever you try to find someone spend money, especially on a support function, to improve something or to make it better, you're going to face tremendous difficulties, and you're going to go through immense layers of approvals and a big layer of clay until it gets done. So that's a factual thing, but it has nothing to do with AI in itself. It's something that we always face. Yeah. I think on AI, another limitation that I see, at least at the moment, it may change because societies change, is what I would call the blood, sweat, and tears effect. So if I'm wrong, my CEO wants someone to yell at, and he wants a person. He doesn't want to yell at a machine. So until the moment that my CEO accepts that the machine was wrong, or I can say, well, but the machine told me to do so, I will for sure have a job.
That's an interesting point. Excuse me? Yes.
I just have a comment to make about, how AI could use, from gathering from what I can hear from you, that you deal with hundreds and thousands of contracts dealing with certain situations and business proposals, that the AI could actually work in the compliance aspect of it. If you have A, B, C, D in a contract, which has to be adhered to and which has not been adhered to from various different jurisdictions, perhaps different suppliers, etc., it could immediately raise a flag and say, this has not been done as per the contract that was signed between you and. So what happens, when a person like you is looking at, the contracts have been done and compliance has not been met and certain aspects of the have not been adhered to, the AI could help if you had designed a program that which would inform the system flagging the non-adherence or non-compliance, as we were talking in the morning, about the clauses in the agreement, whether it is shipments of X commodity or payments of X amount, or time for delivery, etc. So it sort of immediately says and pulls you out and said this part of the contract has not been entered. Maybe just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman.
Thank you. I have a question for Dr. Florian. I have observed it as well as for Hisham Oweis. You see, from what Dr. Florian was saying, if I'm able to understand rightly.
Sorry, the voice is not very clear.
Yeah, if from what I understood from the discussions, how AI is so different, as Dr. Florian had pointed out, that see, we use search engines for finding out various decisions in different platforms. By putting out one word, advanced search, use another word. For example, Contract Act, Force Majeure, if you put a search, recent decisions, we get a number of decisions out in the various blogs. Then we narrow it down, and then again to quote a particular section, we get different. So how AI is different than the search engines which are already available and existing in the legal platform?
So I'm not a technical expert, so maybe I'd have to refer back to you for that. But my understanding is that the regular search engine can help you find a judgment, can help you find the contract, so it can tell you where things are. What AI can do on top is it can, if you feed it with a contract and you feed it with a situation, it will, without you thinking in between and without you feeding the search engine, give you certain judgments that fit your case, give you a certain background data that will fit your case, because it's intelligent, right? So it can replace this thought in the human brain. What it cannot tell you is what to ultimately do with the overall information that you have in the end. So this, I think, is still something that AI cannot replace. But I think the big change compared to the search engine is you don't have to feed the search engine anymore. You just feed in your case, and then artificial intelligence basically fills the search engine for you and finds the appropriate judgments and precedences that you will need.
Thank you, Dr. Florian. We'll be taking last two questions. Dr. Sunanda had something to ask.
Yes, I thank the panel for such a stimulating discussion, first of all, to begin with. So my question is not so much on AI, not at all on AI rather, but just the first part of the topic, that is COVID-19, force majeure and contract issues. Now, in jurisdictions such as India, we have something known as frustration of contract. Say because of act of God, there's something has happened because of which the contract cannot be fulfilled. Now, usually that kind of defense is taken by either the plaintiff or the defendant, because it is usually one party that is affected. But when we come, when it comes to pandemic such as the COVID-19, which has affected the globe as such, which is like it's systemic and its effects are far and wide. Almost everybody has been affected. So my question is, can this relief, because of this force majeure relief, be claimed by both the parties? Is it even possible legally?
Yes, of course. Force majeure, it's related to contracts. So any affected party by the force majeure, he can claim for the termination. It's not a one-sided agreement, of course, and any affected party he can. This is why I was saying from the beginning, it's a case to case, and it depends on whether this party really affected with the COVID-19 and the pandemic or not. This is a very important point, need to be proven from the claimant or from the plaintiff before he file his case to terminate.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, last question.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the valuable discussion and questions. So I really had a very good chance to understand and build a lot of knowledge. My question again will be relating the AIs, because this is the main priority for each industry now. Regarding the contracts, so usually companies building templates for contracts. So AIs, yes, will support, but will not add that much value. My question will be regarding the gray areas. So in the future, in your view, will you expect that AIs can help you in the gray areas and give you advice, tailored advice based on your question, or we will still need to the human inputs to give that such advices? Thank you.
I think Dr. Florian already answered this question in his previous answer, that AI can give you the analysis, but you will always need the human to tell you what to do with it.
No, I think we're already there. I mean, I think it will. Your question is not an or question. Your question is to be answered with yes and yes. I think it will have a tremendous impact on how we exercise our profession. And yes, we will still have the human impact. So if you look at the area of claims, for example, right? If you are someone who is claiming from certain people only on the repetitive case that somebody has not paid by the date when due, and then you go after him, that's a repetitive case. You can feed AI with this, and then you can have AI handle all these claims. If you look at the claims that, for example, my company is handling, if you have a unique power station that you're building, and you have a civil subcontractor that has made an unprecedented mistake, I do not believe that AI is going to help you much, because there's not going to be an algorithm for that, because you just do not have enough data, right? Or in other words, so if you consider yourself a bad lawyer who's only able to handle repetitive cases, you may be scared. If you consider yourself a good lawyer who is able to handle unique scenarios and to provide strategic advice, I think there's no need to be scared of losing your job. It all depends on your self-assessment.
I would like to also to add something here. If it depends on the data which will be provided, maybe the party will not upload the required data or the full data, or maybe he will hide some sort of important documents or important facts. This is why the human interaction and the discussion with the client sometimes is very important to provide the advice and estimate his legal situation. Sometimes we ask about a point, he think the client, it's not important at all, or a document, it's not important at all to provide, while it will change the whole situation. But if he will just provide the application or a website with what he think is correct from his own view, he will get a wrong advice.
We have one last question from our virtual attendees. So, Ms. Rania Ghosh will be coming live and she'll be asking you the question.
Thank you for the interesting session. The two topics, they are very interesting and they bring lots of insight and input. My question is, before going into the step of analyzing the data that is brought by the AI, my question is with respect to the algorithms that will take this data. And there's a human element in these algorithms. and how they bring in the data to be analyzed. How do you see the standardization process in writing these algorithms? Because to my understanding, if I want to get information from a contract, for example, if we relate it to the COVID, whether it's a force majeure or it's an exceptional circumstance, that will be built in the algorithm itself. And I want to be corrected if this is right or wrong. So in this way, what I use in certain perspective on a certain mindset or thinking or analysis, it will not fit in the same line of feeding of the data, whereas it has been developed by somebody else, this algorithm. This is my question. I hope I made it clear. Thank you.
So I can try to answer this. So again, as I've said before, I think your understanding is correct, and it's also my understanding that certain elements of human thought processes can be baked in to an algorithm and can replace certain thought processes that we are conducting now on a manual basis. What you're raising is a very interesting question, right? The algorithm is going to be made by someone else. And that brings me back to what I've said in the beginning. That's a question, who's going to be liable if the algorithm is wrong, right? Is it the person who used the algorithm? Is it the person who drafted the algorithm? So there are, I think, a ton of very, very interesting and unsolved, and I don't have the answer either, just to prevent the next 20 questions. A ton of legal questions related to the usage of AI in our field. Yeah. I hope that answers your question a bit.